defensive in nature, trying to put your king in the back line?
A castle is just a way to keep your king safe, and you never know when things start breaking open, and you don't really want your king to be out in the center because he's just a much bigger target that way.
All right.
Both players playing their knight's pawn, possibly looking to fianchetto their bishops.
Okay, bishop moves forward.
It's a pretty aggressive spot. Black plays a little bit more passive, potentially safer.
Decision making here. See him taking it and moving their pawn up 2 spaces there.
White pushing the H pawn, possibly trying to break open that side of the board where black is just castled.
All right. And a rook moves up.
Right for the attack. Has removed his own ability to castle on that side. Oh, and he does not see the bishop.
Losing his rook there.
Now white has doubled pawns on that H file. Not really something we're looking for, but it's not necessarily over yet. Black kicking out the bishop on the light squares. Moving it back and getting that angle onto the king side of the board, looking to attack maybe.
All right. Slowly making decisions.
Black considering his options. He might want to keep playing a little slow and wait for white to come in for another attack, or maybe he wants to make his own attack. Very, very slow queen move, but it does connect the rooks on the back rank. It's a very safe position.
Alright, here in this round robin, we'll be each player playing off against each other once. Right now we're in the first game of the night. It's not chess pun. Just because I said night. I know people out there thinking it's chess pun. Alright.
Black's starting to push his queenside pawns. Probably trying to take some of that space back from white.
Okay. Hovering a piece right there, seeing if they're going to move it up.
These are very important decisions. One wrong move and everything could fall apart.
Yep. Each player kind of trying to stay one step ahead of their opponent here.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, knight moves up.
White sacrifices the pawn, or sorry, the knight, but also opens up the rook to attack his bishop. Potentially missed that.
Yep. And then black side taking that chance to push the rook forward.
Now I would say black has a pretty strong advantage here. It is still far from over, but black still has both rooks and an extra knight, I believe.
Looks like it. White side down a rook here, down a bishop.
White moves the queen forward, helps defend that pawn on the b file. Puts a little bit of pressure on the rook, but not too much.
Really it puts pressure if the rook decides to take any pieces there, but now putting
Black
the knight.
attacks the queen.
You see it, feels the tension, and need to. Oh, never mind.
White
Leaves
take
queen
black's
wide open.
queen on the d7 square. And black takes the white queen. So both players are now down their queens.
What do you think
still,
of that?
Fairly evenly matched.
What do you think of that trade there?
I think that's probably a better trade for black. When you have more material, you generally want to take as many pieces off the board as you can, just to make the game a little simpler. So
Alright.
now we're looking at a position where black is up a rook and a bishop. And when you're up that much material, you kind of just want to take it easy and not throw away any material.
Okay. Again's looking to move their knight forward so they're not pressured by that pawn anymore.
He's also putting a little bit of pressure on that king side. The king is still very safe right now, but If he can get a few more pawns, possibly his rook up that way, that could change at any second.
Alright.
Black decided to kick out the knight.
Using that opportunity to retreat. Wait, never mind. Gonna have to push back somewhere.
Right. White brings back the knight, takes the pawn in the center, and now has full control of the center, which is a very good thing to have.
And you see the careful play there, you know, kind of making the decision, am I in danger when I move back onto that pawn?
Black moves forward with his knight. He does block in his own bishop with that, though. So the bishop takes the knight with the pawn. Not necessarily a bad move. Black takes back with the bishop. White going for a little bit of aggression, moving the rook out and sacrificing the pawn.
Alright, rook pushes forward.
Does take the pawn on the c file.
I mean, here you gotta think, you know, black having so much more material on his side with the 2 rooks and a bishop still.
Yep, I think black should just be trying to kind of make this as simple as possible. Potentially trade off a rook and look for a checkmate as soon as possible.
Alright.
Black does check with the rook in the back rank.
Forcing him to move your king.
Moves up a little bit. I believe the king is still fairly safe. He's on a light square, which means the dark square bishop really can't do much about him right now.
Alright. I'm watching there. Maybe some positions he can put the bishop in to create a little more pressure here.
It's tough to say. The bishop might be nicer on that c3 square, but currently it is blocked by the knight, so it's a little hard to do.
That's true.
Still plenty of time left. Both players still have fighting chances. I think the biggest problem for white right now is those doubled H pawns. They really just can't do much. Black does attack the white rook, currently defended by the bishop, so that if he does take it, it will be taken back.
Alright. Again, hovering a piece right there, trying to figure out where do they want to move it. Takes some time to figure out their position, but it's important here.
White declining the rook trade, possibly attacking the bishop, but he does forfeit his pawn on the b3 square.
Now, both players here with a significant amount of time left. That's one thing we haven't really talked about. Starting here, they each had 10 minutes to make their decisions. White side with only about 3 minutes and 30 seconds left, and black side having 6. Could come into play a little bit later if they continue to take time like this.
You know, I think it can already play a big part right now. It's tough when you're short that much time. You know you have to make your decisions faster. It is easier to make a mistake.
All right.
White kind of attacking that bishop again. How will black react?
Takes
Goes
the bishop.
for a more aggressive position for the bishop, but it is taken by the knight. Well, black takes the pawn and attacks the knight right back.
Here's gonna be rough. Needs to kind of make a decision. What are they gonna do with their knight there? This is a dangerous spot with 2 rooks in play.
It's very true.
Not quite ready to put him in checkmate though. Pushes further into the
I'd
pawns.
say that is a very good move for white. It does prevent the ladder mate from black. But what will he do now?
Okay.
Black taking his king, kind of activating it, attacking the rook, kicking it out. Could be a very, very powerful move. White obviously moves the rook to safety. Make sure to protect it. It's very important. When that's your most powerful piece, you don't want to lose it. White checks the king. You know, in the late game, having that king activity from black is very important. You don't want it just sitting back there. You want to get it participating in the fight. So to see it kind of pushing the rook out is a very good thing.
Alright. Rook kind of pushing in here.
White does pin the pawn to the king, but black, actually, because he has a battery set up with his rooks, attacks the king, and it cannot be taken back because of the other rook.
Very smart play on the black side. Using that opportunity to take the knight.
The knight is down.
White left with one more strong piece and 3 pawns.
It is all but over now. As long as black can make a clean conversion into a winning position, then it is, like I said, all but over.
Alright, so you say making a clean conversion. Now, you recommend smothering your opponent down. Alright, pushing the king back in the
black
corner.
is going for the ladder mate, and that is checkmate. I'm sorry, it is not yet.
Right.
One more blocking move, and now it is checkmate.
There it is, good game, and it's taken. Alright, with that said, we're going to go to a quick commercial break as we switch over to our next players. Stay tuned, because that's the first match we got plenty more to come. Alright, and we are coming back in. Wedge taking over Helpful Miner in that first game. Now we're moving on to the second game. Helpful Miner versus Maine. Both players here, round robin, they'll all be playing each other at least once. Depending on outcomes, maybe multiple times. Here, Helpful Miner staying on the west side.
Oh wait, I played against somebody else.
Alright, there's been a short technical difficulty. I'm going to go fix that real quick so I can get these two players back into a match against each other. So stay tuned and we'll go straight into that one. we're coming straight back into it. There's a bit of an error when they're hitting the rematch button. Sometimes you just hit the wrong button. But we are back, both players at it. Helpful Miner on black side here, main on white side. Looking at the starting play, a knight already out on both sides of the table.
So the game did start with a king's pawn opening, and he actually pushed that pawn all the way to the e5 square, which kind of clamps down that knight's normal developing square on, I believe that is f6. So it forces it off to the side. That pawn could become a bit of a thorn in black's side further down the road.
Yeah, just early pressure. Alright, decides to move on that far side. Pawn moves a little bit up.
Slow h3 move, but there's nothing wrong with that. It does also prevent black from moving that knight on the h-file forward. Black is just kind of in a very uncomfortable position here. Does not have a lot of room to develop.
Continues pushing pawn up.
Black
Black
does take more of that center. Possibly just creating more targets for black, or it could solidify the position. Time will tell. Black does check the king, and white blocks it with his own bishop. The challenging thing with this is he doesn't have a lot of space to move that bishop back, so he chooses to defend it with his a pawn. Now the question for white is, do you want to take that trade, or do you want to just kind of leave that sitting there? White actually chooses to attack it harder with his own pawn, so rather than going for a trade, looks to just straight up win the bishop.
Alright. I see on the main here, taking the time to open up the board for himself.
So you'll see that white has this nice big pawn chain on the dark squares, which is really going to negate the effect of black's bishop. We'll have to see what he does about that, if anything.
Especially because, he won't have much room to move right here.
No, not at all.
He can't push into those pawns, he'll get taken back himself.
That is absolutely a big challenge. It is very hard to push into those pawns, because any piece that you try to take them with, it's going to get taken right back, and it's expensive to lose a knight or a bishop just to take one pawn. So instead, black looking to break the pawn chain at the very top with his own f-pawn.
Again, as we were saying earlier,
White taking out both bishops, got a nice bishop pair staring down the king's side, exerting quite a bit of pressure behind the pawn chain. So White's kind of built this position where he has the queen side pawns all kind of, blocking black into the little corner, and has the two bishops looking down the other side, exerting pressure on the other side. So it's a very tough position to play right now. Black chooses to move the knight forward, protected by his pawn. Taking a bit of space, that's important, is to get space as much as you can. Despite the position looking very, very compact, you got to find whatever you can and make use of it.
alright here. Both players, taking this time to set up their own plays. Not many pieces have been taken off the board yet. There
Very
is a
true.
castle.
Yeah, White castles, gets the king to safety. Black potentially looking to castle themselves. There's quite a bit of tension on the board right now. The F and the E pawns are staring at each other, as well as the bishops on the queen side looking at each other. There's quite a bit of tension, and I feel at any moment now things are just going to start falling apart. Somebody is going to come out victorious. This one will most likely not end in a draw.
Okay.
So both players now castled. gotten their kings to safety. White plays very aggressive with those kingside pawns. Potentially a risky move. The king might not be as safe anymore. But with that much space, it might be warranted to go for that attack.
Alright, both players here with a similar amount of time left on the clock. Still early into the game.
Black trying to figure out what to do with that knight. Possibly moving it forward, possibly moving it back. And as long as it is safe or claiming some value, I believe that's what they're looking to do. Chooses to move the knight back where it's a little safer, possibly not as active, might not be doing very much in the future, at least until that side kind of opens up.
Alright, they continue to take their time right now. White making a decision on what he's going to move.
I believe White is trying to take their time and figure out the best way to open this up. You know, when they have this much space, most likely they're going to have some form of advantage coming out of it, but you have to look for the right attacks to make sure you don't, you know, accidentally lose a piece in the attack.
Okay. Taking quite a bit of time running through different plays. In a 10-minute match, you have this time to spend, but you don't want to run out of it, and that is another lose condition for you.
Absolutely. White goes to attack the bishop yet again with the a-pawn. It's a very risky position for black.
Alright, gonna have to make the decision on whether or not they're gonna start pushing their bishop back, or they're gonna just give it up here and try to make a play of their own.
Yeah, at this point, it might be worth trading it off, or it might be worth bringing it all the way back where it's a little safer and maybe looking to make some play on the king side.
But with both pawns there intersecting on the bishop, that may not be the best trade they can make. Alright, hovering a few pieces there, trying to figure out where they're going to move. Pushing it back towards...
Black does choose to bring the bishop back to safety, trying to keep their pieces on the board. Now, I do believe that not a single piece or pawn has been taken this game. This is a very, very closed position. One player will have to make that aggressive move to start opening it up and making an attack.
It is going to be difficult, I feel, for black to make that push, though, with all of that space being taken up by the white side's board. Army pushing steadily forward.
Yeah, it looks like right now black is just trying to play nice and solid so that any attack that does come in is easily thwarted.
Yeah, not making any risky trades here.
Right, White just looking for that one weakness to open it up, and it is not easy to find. White starting to bring the queen out, possibly looking for an attack there. Obviously the most powerful piece on the board, looking to attack with it and really make some space.
Does in fact move in 8 directions.
It does. It is the
It's
only
pretty
piece to
good.
move in 8 directions. Very good.
It's a pretty good piece.
Some would say that the queen is a little overpowered, but
With when's chess 2 coming out?
they might fix that.
That's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for my chess patch notes. That's when I'll get back into the game. I dropped it like a year into development, but the next patch comes out, or chess 2, with it adds a 3rd dimension, it'll be crazy. Pawn.
Black playing d4 or d5 now, excuse me. White has an interesting option here, is en passant. As the black pawn has moved right past the white pawn, he can actually take it with the e-pawn despite it not being on the normal square to take it with. Might be worth it, might not, but it is an interesting decision.
Alright. Back in the hands of main here. Taking time to make a decision. But clock continuing
White
to
does
push
go
back.
for the en passant, actually takes that d-pawn. Black will most likely take it back now, but which piece is up to them.
Alright, hovering hovering a piece there, deciding on what play to make, trying to look for different outcomes, and
Black
moves it.
does take it with the bishop. Now, this does kind of create this kind of 4-on-3 with the pawns on the king side, but white does still have a little bit of center control with the d pawn. So we'll see how that develops in the future. But now that things have opened up a bit more, both players might be a little more excited to start making an attack.
Right, yeah,
White does look to set up a battery on the e file, with their queen and rook. Black does defend it. White moves the queen up even further, 4th rank, possibly looking to attack the knight or the weak pawn on the h square. It does set up another battery with the bishop, so this could be a pretty devastating attack if it works. Black probably looking to make some counterplay or potentially just keep playing solid and creating that defensive blockade that's very hard to get through.
Yeah, with the queen here in this position, aren't pushing the rook up.
Yeah, that is actually called a rook lift, trying to get that rook up. And white does, I believe, sacrifice. Oh no, it took the knight on the h6 square. White now comes in with the queen, protected by the bishop. Black will have to move to safety here.
I'm looking, does
Alright, black moves over to safety. Now, when you have a queen in your back rank like that, it can be very devastating if you can't control it.
could the king not end up deciding to take the queen in that position now?
The king could not take the queen because it was protected by the bishop on the d3 square,
Oh, I see.
staring down the board, kind of covering it.
Very smart play.
This is a very tough position to play from, where your king is kind of blocking the rook and the queen. You don't have a lot of room to work with. You have to be very careful here. One wrong move and it could actually mate you. Black does move the king out of the way, does get checked and have to return it right back to where it was. Black might have to look to create some space, maybe in the center, to start getting those pieces out. Because right now, although the queen is exerting a lot of pressure on the king, I don't believe it is actually creating a real threat. It's just kind of standing there menacingly. If it's not dealt with, it could turn into a serious problem, though.
The ball is in the court of white here. Main taking his time.
White does have
make
a
it.
few options. White can potentially start to bring the knights a little closer and look to bring them into the attack. You could also bring the bishop closer and maybe exert some pressure on the other pieces. White does choose to push the pawn forward, and black chooses to attack the queen with the rook. It is obviously protected by the queen and the bishop as well as the king. So white moves the queen to safety.
Right, taking the time to work back out of there.
Gets to safety, exerting some pressure on that f pawn, which would result in a check, which could be bad.
Okay, hovering over the king and decides to move it.
Yep, moves it over because now the king cannot really be threatened from where the queen was playing before, as the rook is protecting that square. White does take the pawn on the f file, exerts some pressure onto the rook. Like I said, this is a very tough position to play from for black. There's just not a lot of space to work with. Your pieces are all kind of blocking one another. But at any moment, white could make a wrong move and create a very powerful attack for black. The rook comes in, takes the e pawn. That's actually not able to. Oh, it does get taken by the bishop. I didn't even see that.
Right, sneaky play coming out.
Very much so. White comes in with the queen, checks the king. Black moves the king back to safety.
Main here been on the defensive this entire game on the white side of the board, but the defense from Helpful Miner keeping himself in the game, making these smart decisions on where he's going to move his piece. Now waiting for Main to make his next decision here. Both players with about 2 minutes and 30 seconds left on their timer.
White does bring the bishop in. It gets taken. Now we've got double pawns on the A file, not exactly beneficial. But with the low time on the clock, it might not matter very much.
Yeah. Main now left with no more bishops in play. 2 knights and a rook. Both teams have the queen still in play.
White does check the king yet again, kind of creating that pressure and never letting him forget that that queen exists. So the one thing that I think black has going for them is that bishop pair in the very center of the field exerting a lot of pressure right now. Knight does come in and actually forks the bishop and the rook. This could be a devastating blow. Black does take the queen, or take the pawn, sorry, and kind of offer a queen trade.
See if Main here decides to take it. And he
Yep,
does
and the
take
queen
the
trade
queen.
does happen, and now the rook is actually defending the bishop. So this was a good way to kind of prevent that fork attack. And now this position is starting to look better for black. He does hold out the defense long enough. There are no real threats anymore. Black now going for the check on the king. Obviously, since the white player did push those pawns early on, and those pawns no longer exist to protect the king. That was the risk early on.
Yep. Alright, taking the time to move king out, check.
Yep, moves it to safety.
Alright.
Black moving in that dark square bishop, that's going to exert a lot of pressure on the king. It's going to kind of take away that escape square that it was using before after the rook made it move. We'll see what he does with that.
Taking this time to start setting up.
Now, the other thing that did was move the bishop out of the danger of the knight. It's a very important thing. Use up material. He doesn't want to lose anything. Wants to keep his pieces on the board and make that attack. White pushing the pawn and black going for another check. Rook protected by the bishop forces it to move out of the way. White now bringing in the other bishop to check the king yet again.
Alright, not many more places for the king to move.
No, he blocks with the pawn. And now that pawn is pinned to the king. We're considering what to do with that bishop. Possibly looking to attack the knight, maybe looking for a trade.
With Main here on the defensive though, he's gonna have to swing something back into his favor.
White pushing another pawn, attacking the knight, actually. White is making some good counterplay with his pawns and pushing those pieces back. Black brings up his knight, maybe? Yeah, and he does move the knight forward. Exerting even more pressure onto that king. Now, the king is kind of in the center of the board, but it does appear to be fairly safe. There's not much the pieces can do. Both players getting very short on time. White with under 20 seconds now. He does move the pawn again to attack the knight, but what that does is actually free up the knight. So potentially looking to trade knights here. If White takes back. White connecting those pawns in the C and D files, but black taking the C pawn. And just like that, white is out of time and black wins.
Alright, Helpful Miner takes the game, 1-1. Alright, with that, we're gonna go on to our next game real quick. Okay. Alright, and we are going back into this game, which may be the last. Wedge on the white side, main on the black side here.
Looking at another king's pawn opening here. Both players kind of looking to control that d5 square. Bringing the knights out. White looking to take a little bit of space.
Alright, for people interested in chess, is that common? People, making similar openings every time?
Yeah, I mean, most people, I think, generally have a couple of openings that they like to play. White does look to attack that queen, and the bishop actually defended by the knight. So black defends the queen with their knight,
Alright,
but does, in doing so, forfeit that pawn on d5.
much more offensive game here. From the
But in
start.
doing so, does fork their knight and bishop. Very good play from black, looking to punish that early pawn take.
Yeah, both players making quick plays.
So this is still very much even. Black claiming the white bishop, but at the cost of 2 pawns. So white does probably have a little bit more space to work with here, but is down a piece, which in an attack could be very fatal. White actually does lose their knight as well to the black queen. That queen looking very scary now. Kind of staring through white's defenses. White does move the g pawn up to kind of protect with the f and h pawns. Black playing the slow move, but a very safe move. Black looking to exert some pressure onto the queen. What will white do now? White moves the queen up. This does offer a queen trade, which is taken. Both players castle. Black goes for the queenside castle, which is generally a much more aggressive move, getting the king a little further away and bringing the further rook out. This game is still very much even. White down a couple of pieces, but up a couple of pawns for it. At any point, he could start pushing those pawns and try to make another queen. Black moves the knight in. It can't be taken. It does check the king, but it unfortunately cannot take any pieces right now. Might be able to claim a pawn on the way out. Might just sit there and keep exerting that pressure. He doesn't really have to move it yet.
Alright.
And black does move the knight out, gets it back to safety, and takes that pawn with it. Now the good news for white is that did undouble the pawns on the f file.
Taking time to decide on the next move here.
Yeah, trying to make a very, very important decision. Decides to push the f pawn forward and attack that light square bishop. Kind of kick it out.
Both players here kind of side of the board that still hasn't been played or active. Alright, taking the bishop, moving back out. Doesn't want to risk the trade.
Yeah.
And that bishop there on black side locking out white's own bishop, not able to push forward.
Yeah, white does take even more space with his pawns. Moves that d pawn forward, attacks the black bishop, which actually can't back down because of the pawn on the d file. So you could, move that bishop back, but it will be fairly passive for the foreseeable future. This was the trade early on. Black took a couple of pieces, but gave up those pawns. So it is going to be harder for him to take space. White, on the other hand, gets the choice to kind of how they want to control the board, but won't have as many pieces to attack or defend when the time comes. Black does move the bishop back away from safety, but it really just isn't able to do much from right there. Those pawns in the dark squares are just kind of keeping it out. White does move his pawn forward and kind of take away those squares even more from the bishop. Black looking to break it open a little bit, possibly make some space for their bishop. Now at the expense of making their king a little less safe by moving the pawn in front of it. We'll see how that plays out. White making some calculations here, trying to see if this is a safe move to make.
Very smart use of the tools. It's a perk of, online chess here.
Absolutely helps with visualization. Making sure you make the right move first. He does in fact go for that d5 push, attacks the bishop, and protects it from the c5 pawn. Now there is still that tension between the b and the c pawn that might break at some point, or Black might continue to push that pawn forward. We will see. Black actually moves the bishop and offers a trade, trying to get those light squared bishops off of the field because White does have the light squared complex of pawns, making it very hard for him to get value out of it.
White here, wedge, taking time to make a decision there.
White does go for the trade. The knight takes the bishop, moving the king forward to attack the knight. Knight comes back, actually checks the king. White really bringing that king forward, not afraid to use it in the attack.
Continues to push it in,
And that king is going to very quickly run out of squares to escape to because the pawn's taking up so much space in the center of the board.
Alright.
Black actually moves his rook in to defend the knight. Possibly a very good move. There's the pawn on the b file taking the c pawn, but it gets taken right back by the dark squared bishop, which actually now has a bit more room to work with now that those pawns have all kind of moved out of the way. Oh, and what Black didn't see by activating that knight was that it actually blocked the rook from defending his other knight. So the king is able to eat that right up. And the knight moves out of the way, takes a pawn, and White has to move their king to safety because of the discovered attack from the rook.
Knight pushing forward.
Yeah,
Black looking to make some moves here.
looking
There's
to
a lot of
take
pressure.
some space away from that king. White moving both rooks to the king side right now, maybe looking to attack over there. That knight is coming in hard and looking to attack the rook. Knight does trade out for the rook, generally a pretty good trade. Rooks are actually valued at 5 points, whereas the knight is valued at 3, so that trade could be very, very effective.
Alright. Black side still left with a bishop and 2 rooks, as opposed to the single rook and knight combo on white side here.
Absolutely. Both players left with 5 pawns on the board, and nobody has a passed pawn. Passed pawn is one that doesn't have any pawns in front of it to stop it and can actually go promote. If one player does get a passed pawn, this game could shift very quickly.
Alright, taking the time to continue pushing pawns forward.
Black looks to stop that pawn from moving forward. I believe he saw the E and D pawn exchange and resulting in the F pawn moving onto that E file as a passed pawn and didn't want to let that happen.
players taking their time now. You know, it's an aggressive start, but with only a few pieces left on either side, taking time, make sure they don't make any wrong moves here.
Absolutely. Both players have enough time where they can evaluate the position and make sure that they're not missing anything.
Right.
Black actually does attack that pawn, but lets the pawn move forward.
Very smart, 'cause now if the rook continues to push forward and take that pawn,
Yeah.
it's going to end up allowing...
That pawn backed by the rook is now being attacked by 2 rooks from black. How will white defend this? That pawn is his biggest asset right now.
It's a very interesting trade there. You know, could go either way if he continues pushing forward. Now looking for different opportunities, though.
White choosing to move their king forward to help defend the pawn. This is good. If black goes for it, he might lose both rooks, but, you know, block that passed pawn from promoting to a queen. Black now actually attacking the rook in the back. White moves it to safety. It is now in a light square where it can't be attacked by the dark squared bishop. Right now, all white wants to do is get that pawn on the e-file all the way down and promote to a queen. If he can do that, this game is very winnable.
Both players left at sort of a standstill here, with still plenty of time, quite equivalent on either side, left on the clock. But black side letting that time run down right now, deciding to push the bishop back out, doesn't want to risk losing it here.
Move it to safety. White potentially looking to push that pawn even farther forward, and he goes for it. Black has a very important decision to make. Does he want to sacrifice both rooks in order to stop the passed pawn from moving forward? Or would he rather keep his rooks on the board, maybe just slow it down and look for an attack another way?
Very open board on the white side here.
Black potentially looking to make some counterplay on the right side of the board, or left side if you're looking from black's perspective. White moving the h-pawn forward, try and stop that. Black moves the a-pawn forward now, and white does the same. This position getting even more closed as players are struggling to fight for that the e-file, excuse me. It's a very tense position. White actually moves their king even farther forward now, potentially looking to do the work himself and attack the rooks.
That's the sign, you know, of a true leader there.
Absolutely.
Just pushes straight in.
Black moves his rook over to defend the pawn. Obviously, the rook still on the e-file is under no threat right now. The white king actually cannot move forward as the squares to either side of him are occupied by the pawns, and the ones in front are blocked by the pawn and the rook. White moves his knight forward, looking to get into the fight. And black checkmates the king. Like I said, he didn't have any room to walk forward. The square behind him is actually blocked by the pawn.
I just realized like the term before.
Alright, and with that,
Very
we're
well
gonna
played
go
from black. Sees his opportunity and goes for it.
Yep. Now with that, we're gonna go to another commercial break. Hope to see you all back. are moving back in here in this round robin set with 3 players. Each player 1-1-1 right now. This game, we're back to the first 2 we had to start. Helpful Miner versus Wedge. Wedge just coming from a defeat against Maine. Now staying on the black side.
White developing his pieces very quickly. Black trying to keep up, bringing out one of his knights. White actually bringing out a bishop, attacking the queen. Black blocks it with his own bishop. White starts moving that h-pawn forward. That's a very modern technique, trying to take some space, possibly blocking out the knight a little bit.
Now here, the players have now played each other at least once. So it'll be interesting to see how they're going to adapt their strategies.
Black does take the pawn on the d4 square. Potentially looking to trade knights.
Right,
That decision falls to White.
Yep, and you see Wedge here kind of...
White does trade the knights. Does he take the pawn back with the queen? Yup. Black now trading off the bishops. Now that white pawn is going to be a very, very annoying threat, kind of clamping down on the knight. White does check the king, and black looking to potentially trade queens, blocking the king with the king with the queen. Excuse me.
All right. See,
Both players playing very quickly, trying to keep some time on their clock for later in the game.
well, later when you gotta take that time to make those more thoughtful decisions. When it comes down the wire, and any one wrong move could, end up putting yourself in checkmate. I feel like you see when we're watching these cursors, the different personalities of the players coming out. Wedge here, kind of trying to see the future and make his next decision quickly.
Yeah.
Right?
White actually bringing the rook forward, does not want to trade queens right now.
We'll see if Wedge decides to make that trade himself, though.
White playing very aggressively, taking up a lot of space. Black does try and kick the rook out. Moving that pawn forward. Black does attack the white queen in the center of the board with the bishop protected by the newly placed pawn. Black now also has the opportunity to castle on the longest side if he wants to try and get to safety.
Alright, for those of you...
And white looks to trade the queens now. He takes the knight out, and now black can actually castle to either side. White does not have a lot of space with the pawns. He has a bit of space with the pawn on the g file on the king side. But other than that, all of his pawns are still in their starting positions. White does now castle long. Very aggressive move. Black chooses to castle short. Now when players castle in opposite directions like this, we're going to get a very, very aggressive game. Neither player is really scared to push their pawns on the opposing king's side.
Right.
White comes right in with that king. Or I'm sorry, with the rook. Like I said, this is going to be a very aggressive game. Things are...
Alright, rook in
Moving
deep is going to be a
forward
hard
right now.
decision to make how you're going to deal with that.
This is very rare when one player has both rooks out this early in the game. Black looking to trade off the rook.
Pushing back.
White says no thank you, but doesn't see that the rook can actually be taken by the knight there.
Yep, need to move it a little bit further back. Now it's a trade with the knight.
White trades the knights, and now black is up a rook and has some opportunities to make some counterplay.
Now looking at that trade, it did go in the favor of black.
Black potentially looking to double their rooks on that d file and look to attack the king. White moves the rook over, possibly attacking the weak pawn. We'll see what he does now.
White gonna have to deal with the rook somehow.
Just like that, it's a back rook checkmate. Normally in that situation, the king can actually take the rook, but because it's backed by the other rook,
Takes
it's
it.
checkmate.
Alright, and that was a quick game. Next match we'll be going into is Maine versus Helpful Miner. We'll be right back once we get them set up. Stay tuned. we're back in. Players changing their sides real quick, though. Right now, main's gonna be black side. Alright,
I guess if you abort and rematch it, it's just gonna.
could stay on the same side. Interesting way it works. There we
Oh,
go.
there it is.
They just had to hit the switch side button. Now that we're switched onto the proper sides, we can continue the match. Both players pushing up the same pawn on the king side.
The queen's pawn opening. Bringing the knights out early, attacking that d5 square. Attacking or defending, depending on what side you're on, actually. White choosing to bring the knight out. Normally that would actually pin the knight, but because there's a pawn there, it doesn't really.
Right now, for those of you who are keeping track, we're in main versus helpful minor. Main black side, helpful minor white side.
Black does move that e-pawn forward. Now the knight actually is pinned. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something. White making that h4 move. Need to take some space with that pawn. All 4 knights out. This is what they call a 4 knights game, believe it or not.
Pushing the bishop in, maybe. Covering over
Potentially looking to pin that knight to the king.
and does it.
Oh, white do now.
Taking the time, making the decision. You have time to spend this early in the game. What will he do?
White chooses to attack the bishop, and black makes the trade, a bishop for a knight. What that's going to do is kind of permanently damage the structure on that queen side, making that a little less safe for the king. Unfortunately, the king is not over there right now, but if white chooses to castle on the queen side later on, that could become a problem.
Alright, again, using the tools of chess.com. If you guys are interested in getting the chess, I do recommend using it as a resource during this time. It's free to everyone, gives you a lot of instructional material. There's a lot of cool things to help you learn, and we got a lot of people here in the union playing chess. Got plenty of people come in, so it's a good time to learn. Alright, again, taking the time, figuring out what decision they want to make. Main here, black side versus minor. Just going through all the different possibilities, postulating the possibilities, one could say. Just taking the time to move the queen up one space.
Yeah, and what that's going to do is kind of create that battery with the white bishop, the light squared bishop. Sorry. White chooses to attack that diagonal with his own light squared bishop.
Alright. Again, going through all different routes that this piece could take. Slowly going through the options, trying to pick the best
Does
one.
move that knight forward, takes up a bunch of space. Actually can't be attacked by a pawn right now, which is a little terrifying for white. That knight's gonna be very hard to move.
Alright. And knight also in striking distance of plenty of pieces there. Queen moved up to put the pressure on now.
That's an interesting decision with white to attack the knight with your queen. Obviously, if you do take it, you are going to lose your queen, so most players wouldn't really consider that much of a threat.
But now Maine needs to figure out what his answer is going to be to that. Pawn is in striking distance though already, so if the decision is to take the knight with the queen, it may be lost right like that.
Black chooses to attack that dark squared bishop right in front of his king, trying to move it out of the way.
Alright, moving forward, back to Maine's play. Waiting for helpful minor, taking his time. What decision will he make? We may not know.
White chooses to make a battery with the rook and the queen on that same file right there. Might be tough a little bit because the d pawn is still there, kind of blocking that forward progress, but might not be there for long. Who knows? And white obviously was probably not going to castle that side, so it is okay to move the rook that early because of the damaged structure on that side. Black goes for the move, taking the dark squared bishop from white. He does open up that side of the board for his king, but at the price of a piece. So black now has a material advantage and possibly a little bit more space in this fight. I would say this is good for black. White now offering a knight trade. Black saying, I don't want to trade my knight, but I am going to attack it with this pawn.
Very interesting move. Now going through different possibilities that may occur. White deciding to move their knight to take that piece
Yep,
in
and
striking
now,
distance of the queen.
absolutely, and that bishop still is protecting that knight is something you have to remember.
And it is alright, deciding maybe to move a different piece to intersect the trade. Has to go through every single possibility, thinking multiple steps ahead, wants to put himself in the best position here.
He does choose to move that rook to safety, at the same time attacking the knight, and if he moves the knight out of the way, it will be defending that knight on the same file.
Players here kind of at a bit of a standstill. Black still yet to get their white squared bishop out, and that rook all the way on the other side of the board.
When you don't have all of your pieces playing, it could be very difficult to make an attack. Now that light squared bishop is attacking the queen while it is defended by the rook. White really trying to not necessarily take a ton of space, but trying to make a devastating blow on that queen. Black chooses to move his queen to safety, at the same time creating a battery with his queen and rook, and staring right down at the enemy king. If that knight moves out of the way, this could result in something pretty damaging. Those light squared bishops now staring down at each other, both guarded, but there's a lot of tension right there. Either player at any time could decide to trade those off. White actually looks for the knight trade and potentially a queen trade here.
Right.
And black does go for it, looks to trade the queens.
Waiting on white's
White does
response.
agree to trade the queens. That rook now kind of in the enemy's territory, guarded by his pawn, is going to be a thorn in white's side.
Right,
as
and we
continue
see
the
what
game.
he's suspecting there. Maybe a bit of movement on the white side, has his pieces at the ready. Now going through a few different options that white may take, trying to figure it out, and does go with the bishop.
Does go with the bishop trade. Now, I'm not really sure I agree with that, as it does activate the opponent's rook.
Yeah,
We'll see how it pays off.
both players with both rooks still in play. White side, though, has that rook kind of buried within his pawns.
Absolutely.
Does have the option to castle, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, white does have that option to still castle on the short side, bringing his king to a little bit of a safer position and activating that rook, getting it out of the corner. Excuse me. Black chooses to bring his rook forward, attacking that double pawn. White now thinking about how to defend against this. A rook that far into your territory is never something that's pleasant to deal with.
Especially with not many pieces that are able to deal with it here.
Alright, white has been down a knight for quite some time now.
Alright, continues to push the pawn forward. But that pawn doesn't have a straight shot. The king can intercept it. Actually, no, with the rook defending it.
Absolutely, yeah, the rook kind of pushing that pawn forward. It will have to get through the pawn on the G file down towards the end. But that's not something that's impossible to do. Black does take up that doubled pawn on the c file and actively exerting pressure onto that third rank. White offering a rook trade, and black takes it.
With that, going to not quite. If only the knight could move one more space, maybe in chess 2.
Trying to push that pawn even further. Black does take it, but it's going to get taken back right by the rook, and now white has a rook in his enemy's territory. It's a very interesting position. Both players still have a rook, one slightly more active than the other. It's a good move from black. It does prevent white from checking him again with the rook. Black making an interesting pattern and possibly looking to attack that pawn on the a file. If he does, he would have 2 passed pawns on the a and b file. Looking to also make an attack on that king against the pawn that is pressured by both the knight and the rook. White checks black again with his rook. If you're playing black right now, despite the fact that you do have a bit of an attack going on, you need to make sure that your king is safe at all times. And I do believe that it is currently safe. He does continue to move that king closer to the rook, which, when it doesn't have any backup, is a good way to protect it. White does start attacking those pawns on black's rank, on second rank, though, which were a valuable asset not too long ago, as it could have resulted in passed pawns turning into queens.
Right. Thinking about a move with the rook, maybe. Maybe moving the knight. Got a few pieces left.
Black does take that pawn in front of white's king. The knight is protected by the rook, so it can't be taken.
Alright. This is a dangerous position, though.
You're playing white. You have to think about what you're going to do, because if you don't move your king, when the black knight does move, it will result in a check. Which does happen. Black moves his knight out of the way. Now there's a discovered attack on the king. The king's going to have to move out of the way, which it does. Moves over to the side in order to protect that pawn from the knight. And black moves that rook back up and attacks the king, protected by the knight.
Alright, trying to find a way to close this game out. King continues to push away, though.
Yeah, what white might be trying to do is kind of bring that king closer to his rook, make it a little safer.
Yeah, that rook still all the way in black's territory here.
Absolutely, it is always a threat, especially if it's going to keep taking those pawns. That could result in white having a passed pawn on the a file, which after enough time could promote into a queen. I believe what black is doing is trying to set up a trap. If white takes up the pawn, he will actually fork his rook and his king with the knight move. He's got to be very careful of that. He takes it, and he does fall for the trap.
Yeah. Now with this match, it's been lasting quite some time. Both players only left with about 3 minutes left.
And there it is. Black takes the rook. And now all it's left to do is probably try and get a pawn, turn it into a queen. And that'll be it. White, on the other hand, does try and have to maybe make this a draw by trying to get rid of as many pawns and potentially a piece that black has. How he does that, I'm not entirely sure. But this is going to be tough to win now.
Using that pawn to take it.
This pawn's getting cleaned up on the queen side. Now all that's left is the 2 pawns over there.
Considering to make this trade here.
Black does say, you can have my knight. I don't care. I just don't want you to get a queen. And now that rook is actually cutting off the king from helping out the pawns on the king side.
What? This may end up in draw territory. Both players only with a few pieces left. Black side still has his rook in play. White only left with the king and the pawn. All that's left is for each player to make a decision.
Yeah, and black is just bringing that king in, trying to get it to the pawn so it can take it and get 2 more queens. If white does decide to push that pawn, it will get taken by the pawn on the b file.
But
But
that,
black
the
does
rook-
blunder and hang his rook.
Yep,
It's far from lost, though. If he can promote a pawn, it is still very winnable.
I just gonna have to use that king to kind of safely ferry his pawns out.
Absolutely, that's going to be the goal, is to kind of create a kind of red carpet for the pawn to get all the way down to the promoting square.
Alright.
And white just trying to get in front of those pawns and prevent him from doing so.
With that,
Now, unfortunately, in chess, you aren't allowed to pass on your turn. Otherwise, white would, I believe, be passing and leaving his king in front of the furthest pawn. But he's going to have to continue to move that pawn backwards.
and they just keep on pushing back, trying to corner white. Main looking to finish the game. What? Helpful Miner seems to have something in mind on how he's going to deal with this situation. Wants to place this into a stalemate. Just move on to the next game.
That is the last thing that black wants, is to stalemate, and there it is.
A
White
draw
does manage
is
to draw the
made.
game.
Alright, one more time we're going to go back to a commercial break, and then we'll go to the final game between Main and Wedge. Alright, we're back here with the final game.
One more king's pawn opening. Bringing both knights out for bringing the bishop. I believe this is a Spanish game or potentially an Italian game. I'm not entirely sure.
Whatever the nationality of the game, we're moving on in. Both players.
White making an early castle. Nothing wrong with that, but it is a very committed move. I'm not going to be able to uncastle and castle in the other direction later. White looking to just defend that pawn on the e-file a little bit more. kind of got a closed position right now, but he's allowed to do that because his light squared bishop is already out. Both players have now locked out their bishops. White looking to pin the knight to this queen. I can feel the tension building now.
Yeah. Main here, looking for a play to make. Main on white side, or wedge on black side here in this final game of the day. All players in the first round of the round robin had one game.
Oh no, black has taken the bishop with the pawn and damaged that structure in front of the king. He's not going to be able to undo that. That could result in a very easy checkmate from white if he lines up the pieces correctly. White possibly looking to trade off that knight. He does trade it and moves his other knight out of the way, attacking the dark square bishop, which doesn't have a lot of room to move. He's kind of blocked in by his own pawns. Does move the bishop to safety, and white attacks it. White attacks it again after trading off those pawns.
Alright, has a few things to attack that bishop right now.
Bishop actually only has one more safe square to go to. I'm sorry, 2 squares. That's right. White might not be able to line up an attack on it anymore, but it's definitely not doing much where it is.
Alright, looking at the pieces they have left in play, both players having nearly the same. White somewhere, white still having another knight.
Very similar in material. The difference is that black has an extra bishop as opposed to white's knight. And black actually has those doubled pawns that white looks to attack the king and actually hangs his queen.
Yeah, we saw live an explanation from the player right there when he made that move, quickly realizing what went wrong, losing his piece just like that.
This is now very much in black's favor. He who has the queen has the advantage. It's not always true, but in this case it is.
I mean, with a powerful piece like that, now giving him free reign on the board so he please.
Yeah, white's priority right now is either going to make another queen or to take out black's queen, potentially sacrificing one of your own pieces to do so. That's not an easy thing to do. Obviously, the queen can move more freely than any other piece. He does move that pawn forward and doesn't realize that the queen is attacking his knight. This is a very scary position to be in if you're playing white. The queen is approaching your king, kind of taking up those pieces that are much harder to defend from something like a queen.
Again, using those tools to kind of think through and visualize the next few plays that may take place. Looking. Main here on the white side, wedge on black.
White looking to attack the black queen. Most likely won't result in anything decisive, but it does kind of force it to retreat for a bit.
Alright.
Actually, the queen is actually going to move forward to safety, taking that much more aggressive position. But there's not really much white can do about it there.
Very interesting play, trying to just take that space and make the queen that much more of a hassle to get rid of later.
It is absolutely going to be that. It is a massive difficulty to get rid of a queen when it is that close to you.
Alright, bishop pushes in.
Does move the bishop, attacking the rook. Gonna have to move that rook to safety.
Now here,
I believe white thinks that if he moves his A rook, it's going to hang that pawn, but the bishop is actually defending it, and he can move that freely.
Wedge here has a very significant time lead.
Yeah.
Maine gonna have to start making a few decisions faster as the game drags on.
Yeah, if he can
Well-
keep that time advantage, it's going to be very devastating as the game goes on.
It's definitely, chess a game of quick thinking, but with time in play. Sometimes it makes you have to think quicker.
Black getting very aggressive with those pawn moves. White looking to take some more space on the king side and just kind of pawn storm on that side. Make it very hard for the king to stay safe. They do chop off a few pawns, create a little bit more space to work with. If black can actually get that e pawn just a little bit further, it will become a passed pawn after it gets right on past the d pawn. White looks to attack it though, and black attacking the light squared bishop.
Black still with both rooks over on his side of the field.
It's a very interesting game where both players are kind of assaulting each other on opposite sides of the board. We have two kind of simultaneous attacks going.
Something usually you don't really talk about, I feel, is, the attacker-defender kind of relationship in a game of chess. You have to be able to quickly change between both positions.
Absolutely.
Right now, both players kind of going on the offensive, trying to do what they want to do faster than their opponent.
Yeah, it is really becoming kind of a race between them to see who can deal that decisive blow first. One thing white has going for them is they have kind of both rooks in the game right now, whereas blacks are both still sitting on that back rank. Black does take the light squared bishop and look for another attack with the queen. White moving the rook to safety and actually doubling their rooks, possibly looking for a rook trade. I don't know if a rook trade is really in White's best interest right now. Those are his only two pieces. He might not want to get rid of them so early. But he's kind of limited on decisions.
Does have the time, though.
He's down on time. He's down on material. It isn't lost yet, but it's going to be very tough to come back from.
Very true. Now, Wedge here, black side, gonna have to start figuring out a way to get his rooks in play if he wants to start working towards that decisive blow.
Very important. You already see he's starting to move his king forward and try and activate it. Might be a little early, but if he does clear out that back rank and start getting a little bit more space with his rooks, he might be able to do something very powerful with them. White kind of just putting that rook in a very tough to deal with spot where it's protected by the pawn and there's not much black can do about it. Black looking to attack even further, possibly creating a passed pawn and another queen. That, as I'm sure you know, would be a worst case scenario for black to have two queens on the board while white has none.
Alright, decides to push the rook forward, making the trade.
And he does lose both of his rooks, but he's looking to promote that pawn into a queen.
Rook, though, still in play. Kind of taking that pawn and making him unable to make the move he wants to. Now, the king, one space away, may have to give up on that pawn's life. Alright, gonna select which one he wants.
Oh, or not.
Decides against it.
He decides to take the pawn that was almost passed on the d file. Black king does take up that f pawn.
Alright, looking to move the king up, can't though, because the queen is blocking off that entire row.
Yep. The king is very isolated right now.
And with a rook in play, could spell defeat if Wedge here is able to move it in.
Black now setting up a battery, looking to make a more devastating attack with the is queen, and it is checkmate with a ladder 8.
Just like that. Checkmate. Wedge, the champion of the chess tournament here. Now, he is crowned. We do have plenty more events, though, coming up, so stay tuned. You saw our ads scrolling throughout, I'm sure. We do have a ping pong learn play, so if you're interested ever in learning ping pong, you should come out. We have a great player, won multiple tournaments, coming in to teach the game, and just find some other people to play ping pong with. It's going to be from 2 to 4 inside the esports arena. Next week, moving in, we got a billiards tournament on Wednesday, 5 o'clock in the Student Union, so be sure to stop by if you're interested in playing billiards. We've got plenty of killers coming out, plenty of people practicing in the esports arena every day. Every Thursday for the rest of the month, be sure to come in. We do Thirsty Thursdays from 6 to 9. All PCs are free, so be sure to take that time, play the PCs, and try them out and see what games you may like, and find some other people that play similar games as you. We also have mocktails those days out on the esports arena courtyard, so if you're going out with friends, be sure to stop by, grab a mocktail. We switch the flavors up every week, so it's going to be a surprise this week, so be sure to come by so you can see what it is. Finally, finishing out the month, we got 2 competitions in the final week. On the 30th, we have the NBA 2K competition, Blacktop 1v1, and we have a Super Smash Bros. Competition on the 31st. Both those are going to be at 5 o'clock inside the Student Union lobby. Sign up starts at 4. Go to the box office and be sure to sign up. Thank you all for coming out. And with that, congratulations to Wedge on the victory, and we will be signing off. See you in the next stream.